Thanks, everyone. This is Jenkins Docs office hours. Remind you that we adhere to the Jenkins Code of Conduct, so be nice. If someone were to be disruptive in the meeting, our ultimate solution is just end the meeting. So don't be shy about it. If you feel like something's going amiss, we will just stop the meeting. If we were to be Zoom bombed, etc., whatever that may be, we will happily stop this meeting and not feel at all shy about it. We're going to today spend time on Google Season of Docs, and what I wanted to do was go through a discussion about what it looks like. Today or tomorrow begins the submission period for Season of Docs proposals by technical writers. Those proposals let's talk through it, and we're going to look at the Season of Docs site, and we'll use what we had learned previously from Google Summer of Code as an experience to talk through, this is how I think the submission process will work, and what makes things successful and things that make things less successful. Does that sound good to everyone? Are there questions or other comments, other things that we need to put on the list of topics?
Perfectly fine.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then I'm going to just share my screen, and we are going to go to the Season of Docs timeline and look at it, and then talk through various parts and pieces of it. Okay, so, oh, and hang on, I gotta go close my door. There, so here's the Google Season of Docs 2020 timeline. This is the second year for Season of Docs. This is the first year that the Jenkins project has been accepted to Season of Docs. We've had multiple experiences with Summer of Code, and we're using those experiences to help guide us. We are beginning tomorrow. We enter the technical writer application period. That period lasts for a month. That's the deadline for technical writer applications is July 9, 2020. So in this month, this is where technical writers, well, let's look and see what their guidelines are, rather than me telling you, let's read what they have to say. So technical writer exploration phase we've completed. This is where today is the last day of it. You look at the organizations that are available to you, discuss project ideas, and you'll find several project ideas in the Jenkins projects page. So let's get that just to be sure we've got it ready. And Jenkins is here. Oh, silly, silly, bad link. It is here. The Jenkins project. This should link to the actual. No, they didn't link to the project ideas. Shame on them. Okay, well, we'll look at them this way. The project ideas are here in the Season of Docs section on the Jenkins website. And we went through these last week. This is a good place to review. These are just ideas. A project proposal comes from a writer, one of you, or all of you, each of you, and you may propose actually up to 3 project proposals that you include in your proposal. So now tomorrow we enter the technical writer application phase. And in this phase, you apply to be part of Google Season of Docs. And then the program administrators at Google forward the details from your application to the organization, Jenkins. The organization administrators, so that's Oleg Nanashev and I believe Marky Jackson Talia, act as the beginning of the reviewers, and then they, with the mentors like me and Kristen Whetstone, select the projects that should be mentored. So any questions so far in terms of tomorrow we begin this technical writer application phase, and
Mark, if I can just ask one question about the process.
Mhm.
It looks like we can submit this application starting tomorrow. But in case if I, for instance, would prefer to discuss this application with a mentor before submitting, does it make sense? And
It,
my understanding that you kind of a mentor, a good mentor, or as you mentioned, so would it possible to discuss possible applications with you before submitting them
it,
officially?
yeah, not only is that a good idea, we highly recommend it. One of the things we learned from Google Summer of Code was that submitters who submitted things without having discussed them with the mentors and with project involved people ended up submitting significantly weaker proposals than if they had taken the time to submit those things to the public mailing list for discussion and for review. So that a typical pattern was create a Google Doc, share it publicly, share a link to that doc, allow comments on it, and do that relatively early, say 1 week into this application phase, so that there are 2 or 3 weeks of time that you can use to encourage other people to review the proposal, to make suggestions, to recommend alternatives or paths.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually quite important that what we found with Google season or Google Summer of Code was that when students in that project, now it was a different thing than Season of Docs, but the pattern was that when they submitted something that they had not discussed with anyone, it was inevitably filled with the kinds of mistakes that good open source reviewers would have detected and helped them prevent. And it was awkward for them, and most of those, in fact, I think this last year all of them were rejected. There were enough proposals that had been reviewed and discussed that none of the just parachute in kind of proposals were accepted. Did that address your question, Vlad?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the creating your technical writing application is here on again the Season of Docs site, and there is a specific form that you need to use, and it's here. Yeah, so it is, let's see, where is the form on this page? I'll have to go looking for that, but it needs some information. Oh, all right, that's part of your got it. Yes. So you submit that form from there. Yeah. Inside that form, you'll provide name, display name, email address so that they can contact you, and then information about your experience. So the crucial thing here is you describe, this is basically a curriculum vitae, right? A CV. It's a chance to describe, hey, I've done this form of technical writing. Here's some samples. Here's links to things you might consider, or products where I work to help with this product. Again, these are things that you can use to help us as mentors better understand you, understand your background, and know ways that you can help and that we may need to help you. Then inside of it, you include your project proposal. And this proposal you can submit up to 3 on your single application form. And the guidelines here are very good for you to review and be sure that you comply with these. We expect it, and it's very sensible that you review this in detail and assure you're complying with all of the details of what's required. So the organization name, Jenkins, right? That's us. The name of your proposed writing project. So it might be, oh, let's see, an example was the Kubernetes, document Jenkins on Kubernetes, or migrate plugin documentation, or reorganize Jenkins users docs. Those would all be viable proposals. Then the detailed description of the kinds of things that you're proposing to do. And here you really will need multiple paragraphs. And all of those project ideas are assumed to be multi-month efforts. They're assumed to be from 10 to 20 hours a week for the period from, I think it was, let's see, we got to check the timeline. The actual timeline was, let's see, the projects are announced in August, and documentation development begins in September and then concludes at the end or in December. So we've got September, October, November, and December. So a 3-month period where you'd be working for 10 to 20 hours a week on these projects that you propose. Any questions so far?
And Mark, I have some of those, the ideas that are out there, some of those are massive amounts of work, like to reorganize the user guide. Could one take off a chunk of those, and that would be the thing, is to specify, I'm going to do this part of this reorganization?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And it's the ideas. One of the ways that the organization admins tend to assess the effectiveness of the project plan is to see how well was the project plan described in terms of which pieces should be broken out and how should it be done. If we took, for instance, solution pages for Jenkins use cases, this one, there are already about 8 or 10 solution pages, but they are in various stages of disarray. And a project plan might say, I'm going to update 5 of those solution pages, the following 5, and they will have this additional content gathered from these places this way. That kind of thing might be a viable project plan. Did that hit your question, Meg?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so other alternatives. So there is a choice between a standard length or a long-running project. And if you have a project that requires a longer time, we need to discuss that with the Jenkins project. So if you think, oh, I'm going to need 6 months or more, that needs discussion with the project. It is assumed that the project you're proposing will be a 3-month project unless you say differently, and we have a discussion about why it needs to be different than that.
So now this application is for a project that you actually are paid for by Google, correct?
That's correct. So accepting the Season of Docs stipend here,
Okay.
they will pay a small stipend to the technical writers that are accepted. And if you read here, my recollection, it has a relatively complex formula that decides how it is. It's called purchasing power parity. They start with $6,000 and then adjust it based on country purchasing power parity. And I confess, I have not looked at what that means. I cannot help you with the arithmetic of that for your particular country or what that would mean. I'll rely on you to read through that and decide how that works. Now, in terms of the payment of the stipend, it happens at the end of documentation development, and it's calculated based on where you're at, like based on your geographic location. Ah, here we go. And they've got examples. So if we took, Brazil, 3,600, or Nigeria, I believe was the other one, and it's at, there we go, 3,000. Okay, so these are amounts in US dollars, but I confess I have not read the details of this page, but that's the way that I would expect it to work.
So what if one is accepted to do one of the longer projects? Is it the same amount of
That
stipend, or we don't?
and that I do not know. So we'd have to do research on that. I think, let's see if they tell us there. Transfer of funds. You may choose to waive the stipend. Okay.
Oh, probably details not worth a lot. I just wondered if it was,
Yeah, and I
if
apologize.
the extended period, I mean, could I say that this amount of work I could do in 10 hours a week for 3 months, but I only have 5 hours a week, but I can do it over 6 months? Would
No,
that be
and
an extended, or it's got to be kind of the 10 to 12 hours a week?
I think their expectation is that it's 10 to 20 hours a week across the full 3-month period. I know that with Google Summer of Code, they clearly set the expectation to the students that they should plan to work full time. Now, this is Season of Docs is different. It's
Uh-huh.
known that the Season of Docs contributors are probably already working in a company. This is a additional time they're taking. So they set the expected hours lower, 10 to 20, instead of the assumption of 40 plus from the students in Summer of Code. So this one is known to be part-time, but still expected that it is a significant time commitment during the fixed timeline, and the timeline is rigorously fixed. They don't allow any variation in the timeline at all. They will live to this timeline precisely. If you, as an example, if you submit just a few minutes late on this July 9, they will reject your application completely. So one of the experiences with Summer of Code was that we would have students who, oh no, I just barely missed. Sorry, they're very, very rigorous. If you miss by any time at all, you missed.
I wanted to ask, this timeline which Google provides specifies 3 months project, and it looks like applicants are allowed to discuss at least 6 months longer projects, especially regarding documentation. When we're writing tutorials or solutions, it can be on different platforms using different technologies and so on. So endless. So uh, about the time and when we should discuss this length of the project.
During this application period, this is
Okay.
exactly the right time to have those discussions. To say it would have been even better if we'd had those discussions earlier, but absolutely during this application period is the time to discuss. Well, okay, my example might be this one, where if I look at this one right here, Jenkins on Kubernetes, I think that one is huge.
Huge.
I think there's a
Yeah.
lot hiding in that one, and an awful lot of a very complicated, fascinating, and interesting system. And therefore, it might easily be justified to say this is a 6-month project. The other one that is high potential for a long time, this one might be, if you don't choose, rather not this one, the reorg, might need more time. I could see doing significant portions of it in 3 months. Saying I'm doing a complete reorg in 3 months would feel a little aggressive to me. Did that address your question, Vlad?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Do you have ideas, Vlad, for what you want to do, and do you want to discuss them here?
Well, yes,
There was two
well,
separate questions, actually.
I guess during previous meetings, office hours for Google Season of Docs, we have this Google Doc where we posted our discussions, what our proposals, and just during the previous discussion, I shared my ideas. It's about implementing, well, Docker solution. But of course, this is also huge because there are many solutions which we can just provide for Docker images. But it's about shifting from old previous Blue Ocean Docker image to latest Jenkins Docker image, and that our tutorials work. And well, just started working on this documentation based on issues provided by Mark, for instance, and also administration pages, something like, I mean, there are many, many things to do, but specifically Docker would be interesting for me because I guess everybody is using this, everybody needs this, and in case if it will succeed, there may be like natural evolution to Kubernetes because it is kind of technology which inherited from Docker, using Docker inside. Well, just preliminary initial ideas which I can envision. Would be glad to discuss this, of course.
Sounds
Thank
like
you.
a good project.
Thank you. All right, so I think let's head back. Or are there questions from others? Jonathan, did you have any particular questions you needed to ask?
Yeah, you can hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Hello. Yeah.
Very nicely.
All right. All right. Good evening, guys. Well, I have some questions about. The first one was about a template to submit the proposal, but you passed on the entire section. I guess is this the template to submit it, right? Full name, description.
Yeah, let's see if we can find. I thought that they had provided a let's see. So let's go find that. So here we are in the application phase. Creating your application is here. Okay, and it says the form is available in the guide. So let me open that. Forgive, I'm showing my inexperience here, and I hope everyone will just be patient as I work through my inexperience.
No problem.
Okay, so promotional material, eligibility requirements, ideas. Where is I was looking for a form and I don't see it. So I think it is, I'll have to double check with our org admins, Jonathan. I think
Okay.
your application must include the content that they listed here. So name, etc. But
Okay.
it doesn't look like they've given us a specific Google Docs template to use as the base for it.
Which
So
does
you
seem
can
odd.
use a simple Google Docs file, for example, and put the info there. All right.
In fact, that was at least with Summer of Code, that was our experience as the best way to do it, is if you just use a Google Doc, make it publicly readable and allow public comments, and then share the link to the Google Doc in the documentation mailing list and invite feedback there, because then mentors like me can come in, or org admins like Oleg can come in, can make comments on the proposal saying, hey, we need this, or what about this, or here's this challenge.
Okay.
So yes,
so about the proposal, it's totally public. I have no
yes.
problem if there is conflict about my ideas and the other technical.
It is intentionally public, and it is specifically open so that we can all read and benefit from each other. Absolutely.
Okay.
And we fully accept that there may be more applications than we have ideas, that multiple proposals may discuss the same idea. Absolutely. Now, one of the behaviors we saw in a particular proposal for Summer of Code was blatant plagiarism, and we found that very irritating. All right, so it's great that we gather ideas from one another. We should not, however, wholesale steal content from each other and put it in as though it were our own.
Okay. The next one is about the process of control of delivery the issues we proposal. For example, when you work about 3 months, right?
Mhm.
And how it's about the control? How I deliver 50% done, 10% done? How will be works?
Good. So I would think that what you'd want to do there is in your project proposal, you would identify, probably for your benefit and certainly for mine as a mentor, a series of milestones. Hey, I'd like to do this phase and then this phase and then this phase and this phase. And they would each be interestingly deliverable portions of the work so that we could see, oh yes, progress is being made. I'm much less open to a suggestion. I'll work for 3 months and show you what I've got. We would much rather have 2 or 3 days or a week's worth of work and a pull request to improve something, another set of changes and a pull request to improve something. So your project plan should identify logical milestones that make sense to you. That's one of the
Makes
ways
sense.
of showing the org admins that you've thought carefully about what would this mean.
Okay. In case if it happens some kind of delay about the milestone, for example, 1 week, 2 weeks, how you plan works on it?
So delays happen, life happens,
Yeah.
and then the project, more crucially, many times what happens is a project plan is or in general for us in Summer of Code we've seen this, a project plan is assembled. It's the best plan we could assemble at that time, and while executing the project we learned important information that we didn't know previously. We changed the plan and that was perfectly okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
this plan is not immutable. It is not never changing. It's rather, it's a good beginning. And after we've started, we will then learn things and keep refining it and improving it.
Okay. It's okay for me. Thank you.
Great. Excellent. All right. Any other questions, Jonathan?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, so my question is it possible for someone to apply for two different projects in their proposal? Say, for instance, the plugin migration and update, work on a category of plugins, say platforms, then the Kubernetes solutions page also, something like that.
It is, yes. Very good question. That's an excellent question. So the way I take that is what you would propose is you would propose multiple projects inside your proposal. And
Yes.
those might and they allow up to 3, not more than 3, but your single proposal could propose up to 3 projects. And you might say, I propose this documentation improvement, this improvement project, and this Kubernetes project. And those 2 things would be valid things to include in your project proposal. Yeah, here it is. You can submit a maximum of 3 project proposals on the same application form. So did that answer
Okay.
your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So now I have a question, and this is a little odd, but could you pronounce your name for us?
Zainab.
Oh, I would have said it completely wrong. Thank you, Zinab. Okay, I would have absolutely pronounced it wrong. Thank you very much. Okay,
You're welcome.
and I continue to work on pronouncing Jonathan's and Vlad's name correctly. I'm sure I'm butchering them both, but they're very patient with my Americanized pronunciation.
Your pronunciation is perfectly fine, Mark.
Great, that's good. Thank you. Okay, so the crucial things then are we're in the phase we enter tomorrow. It's this project plan that you're preparing, and your involvement with community members like me, with mentors like me, is vital at this point. So you should probably start a Google Doc, fill it in following this outline, and relatively quickly here, share that first draft with the mailing list and the Gitter chat channel so that people can give you feedback on that proposal.
Mark,
Yes.
yeah. One of items of the plate says we need to reference linked our posteriors contributions to community, like technical writers. In the past month, we work on Jenkins and GitHub and do some issues. There is some problem referring this or not?
Oh no, so that's a good question. That's an excellent question. So I think what your question was is, may I reference my recent contributions either from the Hackfest or elsewhere in my application? And you
Yeah.
absolutely should.
Okay.
That is a compelling value for us, and it shows your interest in the project and gives mentors and org admins material that they can evaluate. So they can say, oh yes, here is this that was written. Look, it had this characteristic, and here is their engagement. So absolutely, you should mention your involvement. Now, if you don't have that involvement, that's okay too. But this is a good time to be involved. And if you already have examples of your involvement, show them. Now,
Okay, thank you.
those examples could also be from your professional work. You might say, oh, look, here's this product that I assisted with the creation of its documentation. That's fine also. But certainly those of us on the Jenkins project, as we evaluate your project plan, will look very carefully at things that you submitted as part of the Hackfest or earlier time.
Okay.
Just in continuation of Jonathan question mark, just wanted to clarify, when we submit this links to our previous documentation, which we did, for instance, within Jenkins project, should we address only pull requests, or we can address also issues reported by us? And as I understand, we're not limited to the time frame of Hackfest. We can like address something which was done before Hackfest as well.
You are correct. You are not limited to the time frame of Hackfest. You're not limited to only pull requests. You could list issues. You could list things you've created in the Jenkins Jira system, either issues or epics. Any of those are perfectly valid. You could, if you wish, link to mailing list posts. Those are all good ways to show active contribution and to show that you've given serious thought to how you can help the project.
And another question, if you don't mind, well, they're asking us to provide links to documentation which we did, but we're lucky that Jenkins project has public documentation, publicly available, but many companies, they have behind the firewall kind of private clouds and so on. Does it make sense to say, well, we worked during this years on this product, but documentation is kind of, well, not available because it is hidden inside, behind the firewall, basically?
Absolutely. If you don't, the first note is that a link to your work samples is optional. All right, so it's not mandatory. If you can provide it, that's great. If there is something publicly accessible, if it's not publicly accessible, but you can provide a sample, that's great too. If all you can do is describe the thing on which you worked, that's already something. Meg, for instance, one of the charm things for me about Meg is that she's worked for some very large companies that have a very, very large component in the Unix space. As in, she worked for Bell Labs for a while, didn't you, Meg? And so that was interesting, right? It's like, oh, okay, somebody who's worked in that environment has a different experience than somebody maybe who's worked in describing mobile phone applications or who's worked in describing infrastructure implementations. All of those things are interesting to us, even if, for instance, you can't give us a piece of your work. Oh, you may say, I worked in a defense industry for, let's see, for Jonathan, I worked in a Brazilian defense industry. I can't share the work with you at all, but I can tell you that that's where I worked, and that helps us understand your background. Did that address your question, Vlad?
Yes, thank you very much for clarifying.
All right. Now, Zainab, did we get all your questions addressed, or did I move on from your questions too rapidly?
No, you did. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right. So in terms of the project plan that you submit, these paragraphs are crucial, and read them carefully, work through them. One of the things that may be missed here is that just how valuable it is for you to get feedback from others on your ideas and keep your discussions in the public forums. So there's a temptation sometimes to reach out to one another individually, point to point. And a reminder is that it's an open source project and we value that openness intensely. Therefore, we prefer our conversations be done in public. Now, sometimes you may have something which absolutely has to be done privately. Okay, that's fine. But usually you should encourage the mentors and on your own, have those conversations in public wherever possible. As an example, now, Rawaju Sule, so Larry, and I had a great session in the Gitter channel for Jenkins CI/docs, doing a working session on interacting with Git, managing branches, etc. You might say, oh, that's a little awkward, but the reality is many people in the technical writing space wrestle with the Git system. It's not the most immediately obvious, natural, fluent place to do writing. Documentation as code is a very different thing. So don't be shy about asking for and receiving help as things happen, as you're submitting proposed pull requests or as you're creating issues. We'll coach you and look forward to coaching. So let's see, are there other things that I should probably flag to you? The crucial thing, so after acceptance, we're a month away, if we look at the timelines, we've got a reminder. So July 9, 1 month from tomorrow, is the deadline. Then the project, the Jenkins project, will have a period of 3 weeks to do evaluations, to review it, to internal. You are welcome to and encouraged to continue contributing to the Jenkins project during that period. Then July 31, project selections will be notified to Google. Google will give themselves 2 weeks to review them, and then they will announce. We are very careful that we will not pre-announce anything. We communicate from the Jenkins project to Google here, but not to you. We won't tell you, oh, we like this and didn't like that. Those kind of feedback, like and didn't like, needs to have happened prior to this July 9 end of the proposal period. Questions there? I fear that I may have perplexed some of you.
Yeah, I have a question, Mark.
Okay.
After the winners, after 16 August, it's possible give us a feedback if in case we not approval. For example, you need to write better or explain better your ideas. Some feedback to improve our next year in Google sum of code.
Yes, at least our experience previously was that we give that kind of feedback already here in this period between June 9 and July 9. And
okay.
if that feedback already was not enough, we are certainly also open to give additional feedback. As an example, with Summer of Code, I had one submission that came in very, very near the deadline, and as such had not had much review from people, from the mentors. And so I provided that submitter review feedback after the fact. So yes, I think we will do that as well. I assume we will do that as well for Season of Docs.
Yeah, I appreciate. Thank you.
You bet.
Because, well, if I submit a plan, I mean, I think the odds are good that there's going to be many good plans that do not, quote unquote, win the contest. And that, but that's what, so I'd like to know that the community thinks this would be worth it to do it if you want to go ahead and do it, right? And I would
Also,
get my feedback.
yes, and in fact, that's a very good example of a case where the whether or not a plan is accepted to Google Season of Docs can be independent of whether or not you choose to continue working on it. You might say, I am so interested in this. I've learned enough during this June 9 to July 9 exploration period, the technical writer application period, that I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. And that is great, because we will likely still mentor you, right? We want you to help the project, and therefore we're happy to do the mentoring if you're happy to do the writing. Those are great experiences for both of us then.
Deal.
All right. Yeah, and truly, I have never once felt like I had too much help in any open source project. Not once. There have been times in fact, it's almost universal, aching for more help. And so it's wonderful to have people interested and enthused about contributing. Now, let's see, other topics. Let's double check our notes. Glad, Vlad, that you reminded me that we had notes. Okay, so we've talked about the Season of Docs site and the SIG. And I think, oh, Jonathan, we spelled your name wrong. There we go. Any other topics that you'd like to bring up for today's office hours?
Well, Mark, meantime, maybe is it possible to ask a question also about the process? For instance, in case if, let's say, somebody will be choosing to write any tutorial, for instance, there are many of those which are required. Is it assumption that technical writer will implement those tutorials, will try out this specific solution, for instance, before writing about them, or he or she should rely on pre-existing implementations, for instance, or either way is fine. What is like the assumption?
Either way is fine. And I would expect that if you're proposing a tutorial, that you must have validated in depth that that tutorial works. An example of the classes of problems hiding in tutorials is the challenge that our tutorials have today, that they need to be able to run a Jenkins server and one or more Jenkins agents. And they need to do that all on your computer, but your computer might be Linux or Windows or Mac OS, and it needs to work in all those environments. And users expect it will work, and they are not going to change their platform just because we said, oh, this only works in one place. No. Therefore, tutorials are interestingly challenging from the infrastructure perspective, and the tutorials we have right now are very carefully crafted that they will in fact run on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows, but it takes an impressive amount of work to get them to that point. So there's an awful lot of behind the scenes that, oh, that's such an easy command, you just copy and paste it. But that easy command you copied and pasted was arrived at by very careful evaluation across many hours of, how about this? What about that? So yes, absolutely. You should vet your work. You should be sure it works. If you took on the task of one of the things you were doing was, I'm improving the admin guide, and as part of that, I'm going to write about backup. you would be expected to confirm that the things you wrote about backup on AWS, backup on a local computer with BTRFS, backup on a Windows computer, that you'd verified they work. So yes, absolutely. Now, Vlad, that might lead me to a follow-on question I'm going to ask back and then I'll answer. The follow-on question might be, wow, where do I get access to these resources that I need? And that's a question that needs to be discussed during this application period, because it may be that we can get funding or some infrastructure support from the Jenkins project to help you. If, for example, you're proposing to do the Kubernetes project, you're going to have access to Kubernetes. And if you don't already have access to Kubernetes through an employer, that's probably an expense that you should be discussing with the mentors during this application period. How would I get access to a Kubernetes cluster? How would I start it and stop it and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, there is like continuation of this with Kubernetes. It is kind of open source also project. So we can, by ourselves, technical writer can install Jenkins on the top of Kubernetes. It depends who is hosting. But I understand that we need to discuss all of this stuff before actually submitting, discuss infrastructure, basically, all
Right.
infrastructure issues before submitting this.
Right, and that's it's a good thing. We don't want to, we would not expect you to spend personal funds on running a Kubernetes cluster. That's great if you've got that, but I would be truly astonished. Kubernetes is typically cloud hosted and usually hosted on one of the major cloud vendors, and therefore not free and never going to be free in the sense of execution costs. So that's a good one to discuss, saying, hey, I am very interested in this. And this one is a good example where the Jenkins project is very interested in it as well, and it's a particularly weak spot. So we don't have a lot of great documentation on Kubernetes. Any other questions?
Well, you answered my questions completely.
I have a question on the Kubernetes project. Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can. Go ahead, Zinab.
Okay, so on this project, the more info states that one could aggregate information from existing sources to come up with a centralized solution page for Kubernetes. Yeah, the following information here. So my question is, will this, aside the information in all these sources, will there be need to also write new pages or tutorials on Jenkins on Kubernetes?
Yes, I think so. So at least I think what you're asking is how might the Jenkins on Kubernetes project plan look? How might we express that? And I think this is a large enough topic that it might be that what you would say is, today we have user guide, installing Jenkins, Jenkins pipeline, managing Jenkins. You might propose, I would think we should put a new top level page, Kubernetes guide, or a new page in users guide, which is Jenkins on Kubernetes. And when you open that page, it might look something like what I get when I open this particular page here, where it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 or 15 subtopics under Jenkins on Kubernetes, because you'd be talking about Helm and about using images and about performing backup and restore, all sorts of things like that. So I would expect that Jenkins on Kubernetes project plan would be, oh, whoops, which way did we go? Oh, it went funny. It would be a large thing and could be very much all by itself plenty of work for 3 months.
Okay, thank you.
Zinab, did that answer your question, or do you need to ask more questions to clarify?
No, I think I'm fine for now.
Yeah,
So
so-
Mark, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Meg, please.
I was just say, so what are the practicalities here? If I'm working on this for 3 months, but every 2 to 4 days I'm submitting a PR. So we get the PR to where it's good. That gets merged then to my private fork, or does that get merged to master? Or does it depend? I mean, because there's some things in documentation where it's time to merge it, but you don't necessarily want to publish it to the world until you have the rest of the pieces done. So how does that piece of it work?
So there are, in general, we prefer to merge to master and do it in small incremental steps so that others can see it evolving. It's perfectly okay that the pages are imperfect or not the final thing that they will look like ultimately. You'll see plenty of pages on the Jenkins site that have a disclaimer at the top which says this page is still under development, and that would be just fine. That's no problem. So the preference is that you submit PRs and they are reviewed and you get guidance on them very quickly, so that if something is amiss, if something is a mistake or wrong, we can correct it speedily so that you don't spend a lot of time on something that isn't what was ultimately desired.
I like. Okay.
Yeah, so Zina, back to your Jenkins on Kubernetes topic. This collection of information for me was sort of just seed information. What I was assuming that the project plan would need to state is, I think that Jenkins on Kubernetes should cover the following topics, and then enumerate those topics: installation, managing with Helm, managing with let's see, what's another choice? Yeah, I'm not Kubernetes experienced enough, my apologies, but managing with the Helm alternatives, I forget what they are. And that you might describe, okay, starting a new one, stopping one, those kinds of things. And then during this upcoming month, that would become, that rough outline would be refined, discussed, reviewed with others. So it give Oleg a chance to give feedback on it, give Kristen a chance to give feedback on it, so that you get your plan has been improved by multiple reviews during this upcoming month, so that when it's submitted for July 9th, it's a much better plan than if you just created it solo.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just maybe some silly question. In case if one of us will be dedicated to work on Google Season of Docs project, is it like possible or advisable to work on general issues happening in Jenkins project, like fixing some issues with documentation or any other stuff and plugins and so on? Or it's not best practice to split between this
I think you're asking during the 3-month period that's September to December. Is that when you're talking about, Vlad?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I don't have a concept on that yet. I don't know. I can tell you what my limited experience has been with Google Summer of Code, where the student that is working on the Git plugin project that I'm mentoring right now, he has been involved in other things, and it's been very positive for that student by being involved in those other things, because the student gained knowledge that they would not have obtained otherwise. Now, would I want that student to derail completely their project to work on other things? No, that would be a bad trade-off. But the contribution from that student have actually been very helpful. I was actually a little proud. The student submitted something that made it all the way into a Jenkins core release recently. The student made a fix and it got all the way to Jenkins core. And it's like, that's cool.
Yay.
So the student learned a bunch by doing that. Did that address your question?
Yes.
All right. So the recording of this will be available. I'll post it separately after we've concluded the session. And thanks everybody for taking time. We'll meet again in a week. Oh, I should remind, that's right. Oleg Nenashev has offered a poll of meeting times for other office hours. What he's suggested is office hours during the morning European time. So Zinab, for instance, for you, it may be much easier to join a session with Oleg on the morning hours, European time, based on where you're at geographically. That way it's not so late in the evening for you. You're welcome to join one or both or none of those office hours, but Oleg has sent the poll out to the docs Gitter channel. All right,
Okay.
thanks everybody. And I'll post the links. And that's it.